All right, everyone, welcome to the 21st episode, it looks like, of Canadian Strength and Conditioning Shop Talk. We've got myself, Sam Miles-Frayne, and then additional co-hosts. We got Jordan Foley and Trevor Cottrell. Typically, we do a bit of a brief of what's going on in the world of S&C in Canada, and then we get into our special topics of our guest speaker, and that tonight is Dennis Weiler, which we're very, very excited about, talking about a topic that we are not good at as S&C coaches. So we're going to start off chatting with Jordan with some NSCA updates, and then we're going to end with a little bit of addition with some chatter about the Olympics, which the opening ceremonies is Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we're going to kick it off with Dennis. So take it away, Jordan, and we'll just go down the ranks of the updates for now.
So NSCA just had the national conference, and it was a hybrid, in person and virtual. They'll have a lot of info from that, videos, articles, etc., abstracts trickling onto their website, mostly in the members section. I would imagine that's typically what they do with that stuff. So if there's something that you didn't see that you think might be interested in, be sure to check there over the next few months as they trickle out some teaser content. As well, of note, something that we've been talking about now for a year since they announced that this sports science and performance certification. They had a meeting with the special interest group about that as far as ideas and updates. And apparently the latest update is that it will be launched in August/September. So no hard date or even a hard month. And apparently the content is in the final review. So I would imagine, this is just my speculation piece on it now, as has been throughout, that they're probably still having some challenges around validation of the evaluations. There's some stuff been trickling out in that group now about questions or sample questions with regard to some of the content, and I don't see how it's going to be valid and able to be an accredited certification for that wide of a population. So good to see once they launch that. That's it from the NSCA at the moment.
Trev, what do you got for the CSCA?
Oh, CSCA is puttering along, not any huge news. We have a newsletter coming out in the next week, our summer newsletter. Looks like we have about 6 articles coming out with that. Is that right? Education Committee has put a focus, if we haven't talked about it before, on capturing the high school market and getting high school strength conditioning more normalized. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hire a lot of coaches. It's more around the areas of education and awareness in the high school setting, which I think would be a positive thing and overall trickle down. So we're getting involved with the Ontario Physical and Health Educators Association, trying to get on their docket of conversation for credentialing and standardization in the high school setting and across the different school boards. So I think that's kind of a neat thing. We've created a standards of practice document that is, decent, a bit of an overview of what you should expect if you're practicing in the industry in Canada. The board seems to be okay with it, but part of the problem is we're kind of held up right now because we haven't really defined what a member is. So it's hard to develop standards of practice until we know what a member is. So we're about to undergo a retreat where we're going to really hash out what is a member and then figure out how to apply and gain membership. And we're kind of proposing, I don't think it's a problem for me to let the cat out of the bag, but maybe a 2-phase where we do an early entry membership where it's just anybody can be involved for a very low fee. And then you get access to a variety of things that you couldn't get access to if you weren't a member. And then the second phase would be where you become actually accredited. So it's not necessarily going to be a certification process, more of a recognized accredited professional working within the CSCA. And that's going to all take place over a 2-year process is what it looks like. That is all I have for now.
So for USPORT and the CCAA, so from a CCAA perspective, they did list who is hosting nationals for this year. Although to my knowledge, if there's anyone on here working within that has any better knowledge of if they've actually provided a schedule for their individual sports, I haven't seen any of that across all of Canada. So that would be awesome if anyone's on here can shed some light for that. With respect to USPORT though, they have decided that the fall sports will start their training camp September 3rd, and then their winter training camps can start September 13th. So those things are rolling. All of the USPORT schedules are out now. They will have nationals, and that was a big decision whether they would just go provincial or national. There will be nationals. Not really sure how that's going to affect some programs with respect to travel and finances and things like that. So that'll kind of come to fruition as we return to sport safely. One of the big questions is around testing. So is there going to be mandatory testing before games? How is that going to work? How do close contacts work? Vaccinated versus non-vaccinated? Right now, there's some ideas floating around that if you are vaccinated versus not vaccinated within the OUA at least, then you can't practice together, you can't take a bus together, and you can't be in the same change room together. So lots of complicated stuff going on with respect to return, which we all anticipated, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens come the fall. Lots of things to be decided on still. The OUA in particular did create a performance committee, which was requested by the OUA president committee, their executive committee, which is a big step for us because the S&C coaches and performance staff were finally brought to the table to add their knowledge and expertise. It requested to ask, like, how should we be returning to sport? What are the basic guidelines around load and volume that we could disseminate to our coaches and to maybe some of our support staff that don't have a lot of resources, which we thought was really awesome. So a group of us got to the table, and the preliminary guidelines were disseminated across the OUA, regardless of who you had available to you on your staff. So that was great. Things like return to collision, load and volume, progressions that could guide coaches and S&C coaches and sport coaches, and then some cognitive fatigue considerations. So again, a huge step for the OUA with respect to getting to the table, and hopefully that conversation can continue so they can see the value of not just sport medicine being at the table, but physical preparation specialists and what they can bring. So that was really awesome. With respect to new hires across USPORT, we've got 2 officially so far. Acadia just hired Sean Preston, who's currently with Rugby Canada Women's Sevens in Tokyo. And then SMU just hired Chris Robertson, and he was also with Rugby Canada's, or not SMU, sorry.
Simon Fraser, SFU.
Sorry, SFU.
Yeah.
And he was also with the developmental national program for rugby as well. So it looks like you want some jobs, maybe be involved in rugby, maybe. And then Emerson Morisuti just officially took over as the interim head S&C for my position for mat leave for the year at York University. So far, we're not sure if things have gone out for offers for Guelph for their head and their assistant, but some things seem to be in the mix. So hopefully by the next time we have our next shop talk, there'll be 2 additional new hires. With respect to job opportunities, I'm not sure there's anything out there currently within USPORT for the collegiate setting, although there was a posting with CSIO looking for a couple things. But if there's anyone on here that has any idea with job opportunities, you can type it in the chat or speak up here, or maybe Jordan and Trevor, you have a better handle on some of those posts that have gone out the last couple weeks.
Simon Fraser had the assistant as well, right? I just don't know if that's closed yet.
I don't know.
That's the only one that I know of, aside from private sector stuff that I see up on Indeed and that kind of thing.
Regardless, always check back at the CSCA website. They've got lots of job postings being posted there. Trev, did you have something else?
Oh, I just got an email today from a group in Oakville, Dynamic Fitness, it's called, or something along those lines. If anybody's interested in that, I can shoot the email to you.
Do you guys know if there was going to be an assistant position at Acadia?
No.
I would imagine not. Again, speculation, but just things that I've heard through the grapevine about what their budget is. I would imagine that they would have the that kind of lead as the fixture, the manager position, and then hire out students from there. Although in the past, like when Elliot was there, they did have a main assistant. It was Vince.
Yeah.
Get how to pronounce his last name, so I'm not even going to say it. lose something. Now he runs that place, Atlantic Sports Performance down in
Yeah.
Bridgewater and Dartmouth and all that stuff. So maybe they will have something like that, but who knows? Because they just hired a new athletic director as well, or it was posted around the same time, and there'll be a lot of change there. So
Yeah, for sure. So with respect to the Olympics, again, as you guys know, opening ceremony is Friday. There were already been a couple games. We were trying to figure out how many of our colleagues were at the games, and I know we've got Scott Wilgris is there, Ryan Mack, Sean Preston is there. I don't know if Kev or Chapman, you guys know of anyone else that's at the Olympics right now, any S&C coaches that are there specifically supporting or support staff. But those three for sure.
I think Steven from cycling's there with them.
Oh, right. Yeah, McKinnon.
McMullen.
Yeah, so interesting. Like there's lots of things coming out, obviously, surrounding COVID and all those COVID protocols, and even some mix-up administration-wise for those of you that are getting pumped with lots of social media with respect to the Olympics. Some of the interesting things that I've seen that has really affected experience is you're in 5 days before competition and then out 48 hours later. Not even athletes can go to any of the games, even though they're already in the bubble. They can't be spectators, even for their own games. So if they're not on the actual roster and they might be an alternate, or they haven't made that specific roster for that day, they can't even go to the game. So just a different experience all around. And then if you test positive, you're out, right? So your alternates have to come in pretty quickly. So just a really interesting vibe it seems to be there than in the past. Trevor, Jordan, what are your thoughts on that stuff?
I don't know. It's hard to say, right? The Olympics is so political, and it always has been. So, like, I don't even know what to believe what's coming out of it. As far as the information, I haven't spoken to anybody that I know personally that's over there. So, honestly, I'm playing like at the moment, ignorance is bliss card, and download the CBC app on my TV and watch some of it and try to enjoy it because it's something this year.
Yeah, I was just laughing in the gym about a half hour ago because headline on the news, was it yesterday or the day before, Olympics still may be canceled. Did you hear that one? That was the leading headline on, I think it was on 3 different channels. Officials say Olympics still could be, and I was laughing, I was going, okay, so countries like the US have probably spent $250 million getting athletes there. There's multi-billion-dollar television contracts. Really? I
kind of love it because I don't, like, there's no way to quantify what I'm about to say, but I don't know if there's any more challenges with this Olympics than any other. As far as like the actual viability of it, as far as something happening that could cancel it, as far as the amount of people that will get sick. People get sick. Illness, like, so many people out of the Olympics every time.
Remember Zika virus? Everybody's forgotten about
like,
Zika. Remember that?
Yeah, like they were gonna have to triathlon, like swim through, like it's kind of this. The Olympics is largely something that's very difficult to pull off anyway. Right? Like I said, I'm just hoping to watch good sport.
Yeah, just show me some good lifting. Anyway, I'm excited by. If you don't know, we have a Canadian male at the Olympic Games who's the first medal hopeful in Olympic weightlifting that we've had in 41 years. So, and he may even have it shot at some records as well. So that's pretty exciting. Bodhi Sanave. And so if you get a chance to watch that, cheer him on, little Ontario boy, Sarnia, Ontario.
I'm excited to see Rosie go for her 3rd gold in trampoline. So that's that's my excitement. One of Chap's athletes there, or used to be anyways.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Chaps is not going to say anything tonight. I feel like he's on his phone, like mountain biking or something.
Yeah, he's
doing some YTPs, team.
Doing something cool.
YTP.
I'm just going to keep calling him out.
I'm building some plans. I'm working.
Kevin, you working with anyone cool who's there that you think we should watch?
Bodhi.
Yeah, Bodhi. Yeah, is his weight all right?
I think so. He called me at like 1 a.m. the other night. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, can I have some sushi?
Sleeping.
Yeah, it was stuff like that. Like he's like, all right, what am I allowed to eat here?
And
I'm
what
too
athlete's
tired for
that,
this.
Kev?
It's that weightlifter Trevor was referring to.
Right.
I don't want to
Did you have-
incriminate. I don't want to incriminate you making fun of him. So
It's all good. He'd be cool with it.
yeah,
Anyway,
Just-
good deal.
hey man, living in Japan.
All right. Let's get to our big show here. Trev,
All right.
you're hosting
I'm all
this one.
excited. I'm excited. I am hosting this one. So folks, I'd like to introduce you to a kind of new old friend, Mr. Dennis Weiler, retired managing partner of Weiler and Company. Yes, he is the founder, the originator of the famous Weiler and Company. If you haven't heard, YouTube it, I don't know, or Google it or somewhere. It's out there. It's online, on the line. Anyway, so Dennis is a retired, basically accountant of sorts and then some. Been in the business a long time. And the reason I know him is I actually coach some of his grandkids. And so we just got to chatting. And as most of you know, I just opened up a new gym. And so Dennis was very giving with information about what to do. And I'm talking to him thinking, I'm kind of into this stuff. I kind of think I get business. I've managed and directed in corporate settings before, and I'm clueless. And so I figured if I'm clueless, then there's probably a whole lot of other people who are pretty darn clueless as well. So I thought, you know what, Dennis, you want to get on this? And Dennis is always up for a challenge, and he was pretty excited. He said, yeah, I'll do this. Heck yeah. He's retired. He's got all kinds of time, I guess. And I thought he was going to send me a bill, but he just told me he wasn't going to. So I'm pretty excited about that. So Dennis, anything else I can tell them about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you Harvard educated or anything like that?
Actually, my life story is kind of boring. I was
You're an
born and
accountant.
raised
Of course
in
it
Guelph.
is.
I'm an accountant, so it goes
Yeah.
with my
Supposed to be.
profession as well.
Yeah.
But I was born and raised in Guelph. Went to two different high schools in Guelph. I went to Bishop Mac, the old Bishop Mac that they tore down in the mid 1990s in downtown Guelph. And for grade 13, I went to Joan F. Ross, where I met the love of my life in grade 13 and married her 3 years afterwards, before either one of us had finished university. And of course, both of us went to University of Guelph. Yeah, so I've lived in Guelph my entire life. The longest I've been away from Guelph in one continuous stretch is 3 weeks. So I turned 73 last week.
Oh my goodness.
And
You like Guelph?
I just love this city. I really enjoy this city. I have 3 children. My eldest child, a son, lives in Escondido, California. My second son lives right next door to me. I used to have a tennis court and they needed a place to build a house. So they built the house on what used to be my tennis court. That son, Andy, has 2 sons of his own. And my youngest child is a daughter. She is a doctor of naturopathic medicine. She lives about a mile from where I live. So yeah, I live in this consolidated, tight little group. She has 3 children. They're aged 5, 3, and 1. And those 3 little ones are just the light of my life right now. They take up a whole lot of more of my time and attention than the 18-year-old and 14-year-old that live next door.
So how old were you when you started your company? Did you go right into it or did you work elsewhere and then get into it? I don't want to belabor on your history too much, but.
Okay. I became a CA student in 1972, got my CA designation in 1975. The firm that I was working with at the time made a very, very unusual move. They invited me to become a partner in that firm of chartered accountants the year I got my designation, 1975. I stayed there until 1986. And I started Weiler and Company in 1986. The reason why was because obviously I was the youngest partner in the firm. And I thought there was a world of opportunities dealing with personal computers in an accounting environment, and tried to talk my older partners into the fact that personal computers could play an important role in our professional lives. Couldn't talk them into that. And rather than argue with them, I started my own firm. I started with one CA employee, a CA student, and a shared receptionist. And when I left, there were over 30 people in the firm. So the firm grew and developed amazingly.
So the moral to that story is computers are good for accounting.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. I'm sitting
Yeah,
here
they
with
missed the boat on that one, huh?
3 screens, and well, no, they ultimately caught on, and they are the largest firm in Guelph. They used to be called Robinson Lawton Roman. Now they're called RLB for anybody from Guelph. Probably know them. They are the largest firm in Guelph. They're easily 3 times as large as Weiler and Company. But don't forget, they started off 10 times larger than Weiler and Company back in 1986. So, yeah.
So other than working with me, did you ever really do anything with anybody in the fitness health industry?
Yes, a couple of franchisees. One guy who wanted to open up his own independent gym and did, and that lasted about 3 years. So I do have personal experience answering some of the questions that you have highlighted for me. I've also talked with people who are independent instructors, employees, and gym owners love to have these employees who they call self-employed individuals because they don't like to pay the employment benefits and they don't want to get tied up with the Employment Standard Act regulations that they're compelled to follow if they have an employee. So they call them subcontractors, self-employed subcontractors. That works until the Canada Revenue Agency looks at them, and 80% of the time, no, they're not self-employed contractors. They're employees. So they
Yeah,
go
so
back 2 years.
let's actually explore that a little bit, because that's a huge problem. I have an acquaintance who did that game and got caught, and it got a $28,000 bill due to the CRA for remittances for these contractors who were really employees. So I would say half the people, or more than half the people here, work in a subcontracting type setting at one time or another in a gym. So define for us, what are some of the really simple rules that you should know as to whether or not you're a subcontractor or an employee?
The most basic rule is there has to be a master-servant relationship. Exploring that a little bit further, the gym owner is providing the facilities in which this business transpires. They're probably also providing the people who are being trained by the subcontractor employee. They're probably telling the subcontractor employee what hours they can work. They're providing all of the equipment that the subcontractor works on. They're accepting all of the financial risk relating to the business. All of those things line up saying that that person is an employee. But Trevor, the question you just posed is not unusual, and I'm not surprised to hear a $28,000 bill. But that only goes to the gym owner. And that goes to the gym owner for the gym owner's share of employment insurance and Canada pension. Only in the very rarest of situations is the gym owner charged any of the tax that the subcontract employee should have had withheld week by week. The subcontract employee, if they've been reporting things properly, they've reported all of their income on their tax return. They just get a T4 slip that has to go on their tax return, but all that subcontract income comes off the tax return. The subcontract employee is really only out for expenses that they have claimed as a subcontractor, and perhaps not all of the expenses, because sometimes an employee can claim those types of expenses. But in my experience, the subcontract employee generally doesn't have a whole lot of expenses that they're allowed to claim anyway. So it's pretty much a wash for the individual. It's the employer who gets hit really hard.
Well, there you go. That's comforting for us because then we can just keep milking it and wait for the employer to get busted. I just was talking to someone from Guelph at a related gym, if you know Guelph very well, and they are doing exactly that. They have schedules of hours. They have the money all goes to the company. They tell the subcontractor when they can be there and when they have to leave. And yet they're paying these people as subcontractors. And I'm going, ooh, that is not a subcontractor. Anyway, so let's go on to another topic. So I've created a whole list of questions. That one just kind of came up spontaneously, but it's a very important one to know because people can get burned on it. But let's start with, I want to open a business. So a lot of us have our own small business numbers where, you know, we consult on a variety of things. So I guess we're kind of business owners anyway, but a lot of us are looking at the grass may be a little bit greener if I do my own business. So the first decision we have to make is, should I go in as sole proprietorship or should I go in as a corporate? So tell me the pros and cons of either and some of the pitfalls and costs, could you?
Yes. We'll talk about sole proprietorship first. Sole proprietorship is just a business that you start on your own. You don't need any permission or licenses to do it. You can just get involved and open up your own shop. And that shop can be anything that you want to do, where you're going to be charging people money for anything. In a sole proprietorship, the pros are that it's much cheaper from an administrative perspective to deal with. You don't need an expensive accountant. And accountant's fees for senior accountants with my level of experience in a small city like Guelph, $400 an hour. You move down to Toronto, somebody with my experience will be charging twice that, and they'll be charging you $400 an hour for somebody with 2 years of experience right out of university. Okay, so it's much cheaper to operate as a sole proprietor. It's easier to deal with because we don't have to get lawyers involved, and lawyers sometimes like to overcomplicate a whole lot of things. And some of my dearest friends are lawyers, so I don't mind lawyer bashing and I do it in front of them. But it's a lot easier to deal with a sole proprietorship. You just go to the bank and you don't tell the bank, I'm opening a sole proprietorship called Trevor's Weight Training Business. You just say, I want to open up a separate bank account under the name of Trevor Cottrell, and bang, you're in. You've got your own business bank account set up. When it comes time to report your profit or loss for a year, you just put the amount of profit or loss on your personal income tax return. You don't have to file any special income tax returns or anything like that. As a sole proprietor, you don't get involved with complicated things like HST until your annual revenues are greater than $30,000 a year. So it's much easier to deal with that way. I would suggest that for the first year of filing as a sole proprietor, that you get an experienced bookkeeper or a younger accounting firm, smaller accounting firm, to help you prepare just that first year. Doing that will cost you between $200 and $400. But after that first year, I'm confident that you would probably be able to duplicate the work that that bookkeeper or accountant did all by yourself, and you'll save that $200 or $400 a year. Being a sole proprietor is much better, though, for an employee who wants to be called a sole proprietor than it is for a gym owner. The cons of being involved as a sole proprietor is you do pay tax at your highest marginal personal tax rate. And as a sole proprietor, you have unlimited personal liability. So you're a sole proprietor trainer, somebody comes in and it's a overweight old man like me. You send them over to the weight machine, you tell them, oh, pick up that 150 pounds, and bang, there goes my back. The first jerk that I try and do, and I'm going to sue your ass off because you shouldn't have let me do that. That was irresponsible of you. You have unlimited personal liability for mistakes that you make on the job. Excuse me. If you were an employee of that gym and you did the same thing, they would try and sue you, but they would go primarily after your employer. A limited liability, sorry, does anybody have any questions about being a sole proprietor before I move on? And I don't mind being interrupted with questions throughout because I do know this stuff.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the liability, so if you have liability insurance, we all carry up to usually $5 million liability insurance. Am I protected?
Oh, for sure. Unless you do something really stupid, like you show up on the job plastered and you do something that's totally egregious, you're not covered for that. So,
Okay,
yeah.
way out of our
5
scope.
million, that's a whole lot. I'm
Yeah,
surprised that
two-
you would get that much.
Yeah, 2 to 5 million is pretty standard in our industry.
I can understand too, but okay.
Mhm.
I think it's because most of us get it from an American organization. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
Well, and it's
And they're
complicated
used
because,
to paying those premiums.
well, if you work with professional athletes as well, the premium is really high. It's
Oh, yeah,
double or
I can
triple.
understand that. Yes.
Anyway, carry on. Yeah, what
A
are the
limited
other
liability
pitfalls?
company or just an incorporated entity is a totally separate legal entity. That entity can sue and be sued on its own. The pros of having a limited liability company are, generally speaking, your personal liability is limited to the amount that you have invested in the shares of the company, and you pay a very, very low rate of tax. The other thing is, if people are dealing with a limited company, they get the feeling that they're dealing with something that's more solidly grounded, more attuned to the business world and stuff like that than they are if they're doing business with Trevor's weightlifting business. Okay. Limited liability companies pay a very low rate of tax in Ontario. It's about 12%. And so long as the money stays in the company, that's all the tax that's paid. The cons of a limited liability company are it's much more expensive to operate. The incorporation costs will be a minimum of $2,000. That's a one-time fee. But your annual accounting and legal fees, you'd be very lucky to get off with $2,000 a year as opposed to $200 that I said for a proprietorship. And for small limited liability companies, it could be much as $4,000 a year. So to answer this question in a nutshell, if you're simply a trainer in somebody else's gym, it would be unusual for you to incorporate your business activities. If you were working for Manulife, though, as a self-employed person, I know from personal experience that they would compel you to set up a limited company because that makes it look a whole lot less like you're an employee. However, if you're the owner of the gymnasium, it would be much better idea for you to incorporate. As the owner, you're financially responsible for everything that happens in the facility. If a part-time trainer uses improper training techniques and a member of the gym gets hurt, you would be personally responsible for any claim above your insurance limits. You're not going to get one over 5 million, I hope. If a member of the gym does something stupid on their own, you could also be held financially responsible. And you don't want to lose your house and your other personal assets due to somebody else's stupidity. So if you're the owner, incorporate, and if you're not the owner, sole proprietor.
So
Does-
speaking of that liability, so if I have a lease and I'm a sole proprietor, no matter what, if things go down, I am responsible for paying that lease out of my own pocket, no matter what, right?
That's exactly right. Now, you do have the ability to mitigate. You can sublet. You can go to the landlord and try and buy yourself out of the lease. So if you're paying $50,000 a year and there's 4 years left on the lease, the landlord might take a payout of 60 grand, because then they get the premises back and they can rent the premises to somebody else. And they might make money doing that.
Yeah.
But as a sole proprietor, you're personally liable for all of the liabilities of the sole proprietorship. If you're in partnership with somebody else, you as a partner are personally liable wholly and severally for all of the liabilities of the partnership. You're not liable for any liabilities of your partner, but you are liable for the liabilities of the partnership.
What if I'm a small-time trainer? I train people out of my house and maybe do online or virtual training. A lot of that's going on right now. What would you say, sole proprietor or corporate?
In a case like that, I would suggest sole proprietor with a real good insurance policy, like Jordan pointed out.
So tell me more about leases. You're pretty good with leases. So I've decided I'm going to be, say, a sole proprietor. I'm going to open up my little gym. I'm looking around town for a space. How do I shop for that? What do I look for as far as what are the hidden costs versus real costs? The negotiation process, like, do you get free months? What about the build out and common areas and that kind of thing? What are the common things that you think people in our realm who are starting out with a small fitness or performance business would have to think about?
Yeah. So if you operate as a sole proprietor or as a partnership, you're automatically liable for all of the liabilities of the business. This includes the lease. If you operate as a limited company, you should only give a personal guarantee on a commercial lease as a last resort. So when you're in negotiations with the future landlord, you would first try for 0 personal guarantee on the lease. If that doesn't sit well with them, you would try to limit by a dollar amount. We will guarantee the first $25,000 in unpaid rents, or a time period. We'll pay you 3 months rent. If the limited company goes out of business, we personally will pay you 3 months rent, but that's all. We're not going to guarantee the rent for the entire 5-year term. Okay, so you have no liability on that lease, and we'll use the lease as a good example because it's probably the largest recurring expense in any of those businesses. You would only have liability on that lease if you waived that liability. Another time you will probably waive liability is if your brand new incorporated company has to borrow money from the bank, either for working capital or for capital assets, the training facility, the leasehold improvements. The bank's going to 99% of the time demand a personal guarantee. They will demand that you waive your limited liability. And the line that the banks always used, and they have used for the last 50 years, in my experience as an accountant, if you don't have faith in your business and are willing to give us this guarantee, how do you expect us to have any faith in your business at all? So whenever you have to waive your liability, make sure that you try and limit it as much as possible. But back on the leases, another mistake frequently made is that a tenant will not ask for the right to renew the lease. And frequently, lease renewals will go on as long as 3 5-year periods. In Ontario, we can't go more than 20 years on leases, so that would be the first 5-year period plus 3 renewals. Because if we lease out for a longer period than that, under the Planning Act, we have to pay land transfer tax on the fair market value of the lease. So 3 5-year renewals is the industry standard. You would renew the lease for a predetermined amount of time, generally speaking, not for a predetermined amount of money. I just recently renewed a lease with a tenant, and they asked me to guarantee to renew it at the same rate. And I said, are you kidding? Over the next 5 years, there is going to be an increase in rates. And if there isn't an increase in rates, just renew at the then current rate. And if there is an increase in rates, well, guess what? I get more money. But I'm not going to guarantee to give you a way to guarantee that you're going to have these premises for the next. They had 3 5-year renewals, but they only asked for the pricing to be done on the first renewal period. I'm not giving it to you for 10 years. If you guarantee to lease it for 10 years, then give me your personal guarantee on the lease. Yeah, but it's going to be at a higher rate than you're paying for the first 5 years. Another mistake that is frequently made on a 5-year lease, and I see this all the time, that the tenant will agree to rent increases during that 5-year period. So the rent will start out at $10 a square foot for the first year. It will jump to $13 a square foot for the next 3 years and $15 a square foot for the last year. Well, that's not an intelligent way to do it. The reason why you've got that lease is so that you can guarantee what you're going to pay on the lease for the next 5 years. Okay. Trevor, does that
Really, I thought that was common. That commonly in leases, you hear that. Well, we'll start in low, let us get our business running and make money, and then next year we'll pay you more, and then the year after. That's pretty common. So what do? Meet in the middle and just do it for all 5 years flat rate?
That's what you generally do, because generally when the landlord tells you we'll start you low, he's starting you at market value, and you're going up from market value throughout the tenancy of the lease.
And then what's the standard for, okay, we want to do a build out. It's going to take me a month to build out. Like, do I get a free month and that kind of thing? What's kind of the industry standard for those kinds of negotiations?
It all depends on the building location, and it also all depends on the tenant themselves. I just renewed a lease with a party that had been in the building for 20 years. And they asked for 3 months to do renos. I said, that's ridiculous. You're not getting a minute, because the renos that you want to do, the place can be painted in a weekend. And no, I'm not giving you any time at all. I have another property that there are some medical people looking at leasing, and they have asked me preliminary questions about whether or not I'd give them something, as in terms of 3 months free rent and stuff like that. Finding a building suitable for medical in the city of Guelph is next to impossible. So if these medical people want to rent my building, they're not going to be holding my feet to the fire, trying to give them a lot of free stuff, because somebody else is going to come along and rent that building out from underneath them. And they know that, and I know that. So if they're looking for build out, no. On another hand, if I had an empty shell of a building sitting on a busy corner with tons and tons of parking. And a grocery store came along to me and said, we'll take a 10-year lease because a grocery store, an anchor tenant like that, will always go for longer. But we want a 3-month build out. They would get that from me in a heartbeat. Okay. So those little perks that go along with the leases are all contingent upon the individual facts at hand.
What are some of the old craps that people run into after they've done the lease? I know in my facility, we had to build out, and I proposed a certain thing for the build out. They approved it. And then after we started the lease, they came back and said, well, so how are you going to build this part? And I'm going, no, I'm not building that part. That's not in my plans. And they go, well, we kind of expected you to build that part. And so what are some of the things you look back, like even insurances, what kind of insurance that we have, or signage that you've heard people run into where it's, or problems that you've had with tenants where it's like, oh man, we didn't even think of putting that in the lease?
So unusual things that people come across when they're just starting up business. Frequently, they don't have enough cash in reserve to get them through that startup phase. Startup phase in your industry, I'm going to tell you, I think is a bare minimum 6 months, probably a year. And if somebody told me it was 18 months, I would believe them. Okay. Before you get really up and out of the ground and running efficiently at, if you've got 65% capacity, I think you would be doing well. So look at 18 months. Well, I hope you've got a big enough bankroll to get you through that first 18 months, because times are tough. Other things that people don't think about in startup, they haven't done their planning properly. And so I would suggest that if anybody's thinking of starting up a business, they find somebody who knows Excel, and they feed that person all of the information that they know about this Microsoft program called Excel. And they do sensitivity analysis in that template that they build in Excel. The sensitivity analysis would say, well, what happens if memberships don't increase by 15% per month over the next 6 months, that they're only 10% per month? What happens if we have to give away twice as many introductory memberships, 2-month memberships or whatever, that we had planned on? So you need this planning tool that has to be a real dynamic tool, so that you can see what's going to happen in what you think is the normal circumstances, best case and worst case, and always work off the worst case scenario, and be flexible enough to be able to change your startup program if the worst case isn't working out. Okay? Do not beat a dead horse for 5 years until you come to the end of the lease. The landlord says, thank you very much. You walk away and leave behind all of your leasehold improvements and your tail between your legs, and you say, well, at least I didn't go bankrupt. So you need some professional guidance to help you get out of the ground if you're going to start that gym as an owner. You will have to incorporate, as I suggested before. And if you're incorporated, that's the case where you do need the professional services each year. So it's important to set up a very good professional relationship with the financial accounting advisor. When people are starting up businesses, they don't think of the initial startup costs. Things like office supplies, even in a very small business, you can easily spend $2,000 to $5,000 on office supplies. I'm not really familiar with the disposables in a weightlifting facilities like yours, Trevor, but I'm sure you've got to have 2 or 3 months supply on hand, A, in order to make sure they're there, but B, in order to make sure that you're buying them in economically viable quantities, because you can't run out to Walmart once a week to pick up the stuff that you need. You have to be able to buy them in viable quantities at wholesale prices. Cleaning supplies, another couple of $1,000s. Computer consulting. Yeah, you go out and you buy the box, but when I set up my little home office, I probably spent about $4,000 with a friend to get this box and these screens and the wireless printer and all the rest of it working. Now, the friend didn't charge me nearly that much, but I've known the guy for 35 years and I've done him a few favors over the years too. So there's a whole bunch of things that people don't think of when they initially start a business. If you've got that monthly financial forecast, that will help you react very, very quickly to any negative items that come up during that first 18 months.
So what about if, say you're on a 3-year lease or something, you get the building built out, you get your logos and your signage outside, and at the end of 3 years, they just say, you know what, I don't want to rent to you anymore. Do you have any recourse?
Yes, you do. You follow my advice and you have those options to renew in that lease, because without those options to renew, they can rent that facility out to Good Life for perhaps 3 times what you're paying them. And the people are all already used to going to that facility. So all of your old members are just going to go to, and I shouldn't have used a name like Good Life. I hope nobody here is affiliated with Good Life. I just pulled the name out of the air too. Not that I've ever set foot in one, but where was I? You get the option to renew
Right. Okay.
built into the lease. And even though the option is not priced, the way that a dispute is ironed out between the landlord and the tenant is the landlord appoints one real estate appraiser, the tenant appoints another, the 2 of them appoint the third, and the average of the 3 is what the rent should be. And when you're talking about real estate, sometimes I would just go with one mutually agreeable appraiser, because real estate's very, very easy to appraise.
So now on build out, so you're taking a shell of a building, you're going to clean it up, you're going to put in flooring and a bathroom and maybe a HVAC system.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
when you
lose
go for
all
a
that.
5-year lease instead of
Yeah.
a 3-year lease.
Okay.
Okay. Because doing what you're doing before you put the equipment in the facility, you could be spending between $100 and $150 per square foot. Okay. So you got a 5,000 square foot facility. What are you spending? $500,000?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So you make sure, A, that you've got that 5-year lease, not a 3-year lease, with options to renew. And you make sure that your business plan is done right too. Because those build outs for tenant improvements or leasehold improvements can be very, very expensive.
So here's another interesting one. So I got my lease all figured out, and I went to my lawyers, and it was part of the shareholder agreement of our corporation. And they said, well, show us the actual sublease agreement. And so I sent him the realtor documents, the Orphea document. He says, well, no, that's just your agreement to sublease. That is not your sublease agreement. What's that about?
They probably wanted to see the head lease, the lease from the tenants that are on top of you that you are leasing from. And the reason why they want to see that is they want to make sure that that person can't be kicked out in the cold because you're just on their coattails. Okay. So.
Yeah, and we did have that. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Right. But while we're talking about startup costs, I just want to go off track a bit and talk a little bit more about income tax.
Of course. That's what you
Okay.
do.
Well, this year I only did one income tax return. It was my own. It took me 2.5 days to do it, but I got it done. And it was assessed as filed.
Wow.
Anyway, if you're starting up your own little business, if you contribute anything that you owned before you started the business to the business, you can generally deduct that. In certain circumstances, you might have to depreciate it. For example, if you have a $6,000 computer system and you contribute that to the business, you can write that off. I think it's over a 3-year period. If you have a number of mats that you accumulated just in the course of your career previously, and you contribute 15 mats that are worth $200 each, and to replace them would cost $200 each. You can write that $3,000 off all at once in your first year.
On your personal income tax.
On your personal income tax, or if you contribute it to your corporation can write it off. And your corporation can pay you for it, the fair market value of that, once the corporation develops enough cash flow to buy it from you. You all accumulated a huge library when you were in university, and you can write off that library if you're using it in your business. And a library can be written off all at once.
Wow.
So whether incorporated or a sole proprietor, you can write all of those things off. You have to make a great big long and detailed list. You just can't say, oh, I had $10,000 worth of books. No, we need to know titles. We need to know the value per title. The value is not what you paid for it, but what it would cost you to replace it. A used book will generally, if you go to the Guelph Campus Co-op, cost 50% of what new is. And you do have to do a detailed list. You have to put down the fair market value of the replacement. And a line that I always use with clients is be fair, but be fairly high. Don't get greedy. Don't get carried away. Okay?
Yeah, so it's common in our industry. We've all accumulated garages full of weight equipment and basements full. So obviously, if we have a sole proprietorship, we buy that, we can write that off as part of our taxes. But if we go into another company, even as an employee, and we bring that equipment in, can we write that off as well? And who owns it? Do I still own it, even though I've written it off?
Well, okay. If you have a sole proprietorship, you still own it, even though you have written it off. And if you wind up the sole proprietorship, you do have to account to the Canada Revenue Agency for any proceeds or for the fair market value of that really used equipment when you wind up the sole proprietorship. If you contribute that equipment to somebody else's company, it depends on how you contributed. If you sell it to them, and just say, I don't have to report the proceeds of this because I'm just selling it to them at my cost, You have nothing to report on your income tax return, but you don't own it anymore either. They own it at that point in time.
And so it's the same thing on the book. So as chaps, you asked, even as a sole proprietor where you already own the book. So if you already own the books, the same as you already own the equipment, you've already bought it, you've had it for years, you're taking it there and you're gonna leave it there, then you can claim all that. That's pretty cool. Never knew that. I thought you'd
Okay.
have to. So
That
tell
is
me
mind
more.
blowing and amazing.
Yeah, there you go. Tell me more about your other income tax secrets there, Dennis, because I know I'm thinking all the time about, well, can I write this off? Can I write that off? Of course, you know, if you're doing driving related to your own business, or, you know, you've bought a cup of coffee while going to work, you might be able to write that kind of thing off. What are the other big ticket things that you could probably do that people don't think about?
Okay, first of all, if you buy a cup of coffee for yourself on the way into work, no, I'm sorry,
What?
Trevor, you
That's a
cannot write
business
that off.
expense. I write that
No.
off all the time.
Okay.
Oh.
I meet with a client at Tony's Billiards. Tony's Billiards makes the best cappuccino in the city of Guelph. I know that because I've been going to Tony's Billiards to meet with this client. It used to be 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. Generally now it's 5 days a week. And I get cappuccino correcto. That's with a little shot of Zambuca, 1 ounce of Zambuca in a cappuccino. Because I'm there with a client and we're talking about business, but we also talk about cars and sports and yeah, sometimes even women. Because we're generally talking about business and he pays one day, I pay the next, I write off that the cost of the cappuccino plus the tip. I don't get receipts. If it's ever challenged, it will be disallowed by the Canada Revenue Agency because I don't have proper receipts, but that's a chance I'm willing to take. But I do write off that coffee because it's with a client and we are discussing business. Your coffee on your way in is not deductible. Sorry.
Oh, so tell me more. What other things are and aren't? So if I go to a conference, obviously that could be deductible. If I
For sure.
travel for something like that, how about running shoes?
In your case, probably.
Hmm.
Usually clothing you cannot deduct, but in your case, not only running shoes, but also the exercise outfits and stuff like that that you would have to purchase. But you can only write those things off as a sole proprietor. There's no way under the Income Tax Act to write it off as an employee. There are ways, but they're very, very obtuse, and I'm not going to bore you guys with telling you the hoops you would have to jump through to get those. It's not worth your time. As an employee, though, you are allowed to write off clothing that is specialized to your work. An example that comes to mind is one of my clients owned a funeral home, and the client had to buy expensive mourning suits, and that's mourning as in AM suits, but they're like tuxedos. Not only for the shareholders, but they also bought them for the staff. And under audit, the CRA disallowed it, and under appeal, I had them allow it, arguing that for this funeral home, that was a uniform. So in your case, Trevor, if you had your corporate logo or corporate name blasted all over the clothing that you're wearing at the gym, that makes it fully tax deductible because it indeed is a uniform. You couldn't wear it out to any other gym. And yeah, that's the way
So,
that would work.
Jordan, you had a question, or Brent? Brent, was that you?
This might seem a little odd, but I heard you can write your dog off if you use it for your business. If I bring my dog to the gym and everyone loves her and every day
Therapeutic. It's
there.
therapeutic.
Yeah, yeah. Can I write my dog's vet bills off? I heard that on TikTok, so it must be true.
My dog's a freeloader, so I'd love to.
Is your dog your pal, your companion? Do you love your dog?
I love my dog. She's amazing.
Okay, no, you can't write her off. But no, but clients do write their dogs off. I have a client who has a service station who has a guard dog out back. And this, even the owner of the service station was afraid of this dog. But the dog, is that your dog's tail?
No, that's my cat's tail.
Even the owner of this service station was afraid of the dog. And we wrote that thing as well of all of the food that he bought it off because the dog was there to protect the business every night and all weekend long. So would I try it if I argued it was a therapeutic dog? I would have to get some references from clients saying that.
Yeah, I was asking this tongue in cheek, but actually, when I bring my dog to the gym, people absolutely love her and love seeing her in the morning. And it's actually, you know, there is some therapeutic effect to it. You could make that argument.
Or the reason why they come back to the gym is not because you're there, but because the dog's there.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that be sort of a counterproductive argument?
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I'm the best trainer in the whole city, but people come here because of my dog.
Yeah, exactly.
You laugh, Dennis, but that's so common in especially the small box gym scene, the CrossFit type thing. Like the dogs are the mascots, and there's always a dog there, and everybody pets the dog, and the dog comes in, and everybody's ooh. I had someone the last gym I was at join that gym because of they followed the dog on Instagram, and that's how they learned about the gym.
Okay.
Yeah, go figure.
And that
right?
would be
Weird people.
like 0.5% of the people who join
Yeah.
the gym join for
Yeah.
that reason.
Yeah, it's small, but
Right.
yeah. So write it off. You say, okay, that's thumbs up there, Brent.
So when in doubt, write it off. Do not get greedy, because if you get real greedy and want to write off stuff that you know is not tax deductible, like your daughter's wedding, for example, they're going to penalize you. And once they penalize you, they're going to visit you again. I doubt very much that any of you has ever gone through an income tax audit. Even in my professional practice, I was responsible for probably 600 different businesses by the time I retired. And I went through somewhere between 6 and 12 income tax audits every year. I went through 40 or 50 requests for further information. That's where they write you out a letter and say that, oh, you've deducted this much for business expenses. Give us the details of the 5 highest line items on those things. So there are a whole lot more inquiry letters, but in Canada, we have very, very few income tax audits. They're going to be even fewer in the relatively near future, because CRA is going to have to devote a whole lot of manpower to people who have made applications under different COVID relief programs. And there have been billions of dollars paid out under those programs. And if you ever deal with the agency, don't ever lie to them. If they catch you in a lie, you get on that short list with the red flag on it for another visit. Don't ever answer the questions with any more information than they asked for. If they ask you how many people attended this meal that you were at, tell them the truth. And don't tell them why every one of those people attended the meeting. The question was, how many were there? Answer the question and move on. But I want to talk on behalf of Government of Canada for a minute.
Why?
Because if you have an incorporated company In Ontario, we pay 12% income tax. That's nothing, okay? We pay 12% on the first $500,000 per year. And if you start up a business and you invest $400,000 in that business, if the business makes, just a sec, $455,000, they're going to pay $55,000 in income tax. They're going to pay you back your $400,000. But now you've got a business that's worth $400,000 that you could sell for $400,000 that has cost you nothing. You've paid for it with after corporate tax dollars. So if you're incorporated, cheating on income taxes doesn't make any sense at all, ever. But it's terminally stupid to cheat on income tax when you're trying to save 12 points.
So
Individuals, I want to go back to one of
go
Jordan's
ahead.
other points.
Mhm.
Individuals who are on the sunshine list, yeah, they pay tax at 42%, but below $95,000, individuals pay tax at the rate of 31%. And you're going to cheat on income taxes to try and save 31 cents on every dollar you're successful in cheating at. It's a schmuck scheme. So go to the
Well,
edge.
now I feel all guilty. What the hell?
Good.
On my
I'm
cup
glad
of
you do.
coffee. My cup
Okay.
of coffee, I saved like 15 cents when I claimed that.
Yeah.
Drink coffee.
Oh, true. I don't.
Now,
actually.
the way to do it is to bring in 2 coffees, one for you and one for the first other employee that shows up at the gym. And if they get a cold coffee, well, that's their luck. But if you're just buying
Right.
one coffee, that's over the line. But if you're buying
So-
2,
So we keep putting off one of the questions. Terry asked, what about, so you work in a company, you're like, say you're at York University as a strength coach and you take the team out for dinner because they had a good game. Can you write that off as a personal business expense?
no.
Oh,
Okay, not unless your conditions of employment give you a bonus if they win and tell you, so it's not employment income, it's a bonus income similar to commission income. So you get a bonus if you win, but your employer is also willing to fill out a T2200 saying that if the team does win and you get the bonus, if you take them out for dinner, you have to pay for it yourself. Okay.
all right. I get that. All right. So now let's talk more about dollars and cents. So we've talked about leases and what it costs to be a corporation, that kind of thing. Now you're going into business. You kind of know what your fixed cost is. You've gotten your Excel spreadsheet out. Most strength coaches are decent at Excel. We know how to use those things. And so we know what our bottom line is generally, plus or minus what staffing costs may be. How do you plan for profit and contingency? So COVID just shut us down for 11 out of 14 months, for example. That was a pretty awful contingency that no one would be prepared for. But what is the number? What is the magic number you should be targeting before you start paying everybody around you and offering up bonuses?
Okay. First of all, I'm not familiar with any business in the entire world that was planning for something like COVID. And your industry was terribly hard hit, as was all of the hospitality industry and all of the people that depend on the hospitality industry, cab companies and things like that. The only ones who made off like bandits are accountants because of all these COVID programs. Our clients generally had to go to their accountants and say, this is too complicated for me to figure out. Will you help me figure it out? And of course, we'll help you figure it out. And it's so much per hour. So A contingency like that, no. Nobody can figure that out. Nobody can plan for that. The best way, though, to deal with the unexpected things that might hit your business month to month is just like you said, Trevor. Know that spreadsheet inside out, know how to work it yourself, build in that sensitivity analysis, and bring that spreadsheet up to speed every month. Okay, comparing the target number of full paying members, we'll call them adult members and junior members, target number of juniors, actual number. So you've got to compare. And then you've got to ask yourself, okay, my target is here, my comparative is there. Why am I off target? It's either good news or bad news. You got a whole lot more people coming in than you anticipated, or a whole lot fewer. You don't have to react to the reasons why a whole lot more coming in are occurring very quickly, because that's real good news. But if it's bad news, you got to figure out why we're not hitting these targets, what we can do to get back on track, if you pardon the pun. Did any of you get it? Back on track?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, bad.
sorry.
Yeah, but should you be looking for like every month putting away 5% of gross or 2% of net, or you know, how do you go planning for that stuff?
There is no formula.
Mm.
Until you're breaking even, you should not be planning on putting away anything. You're not going to break even until, if you're very, very fortunate, 6 months, and more realistically, 18 months. After a number of months, I would put away funds for a rainy day based on the bottom line, not on the top line. Because if you're basing the amount to put away on your top line numbers, you might be starving your business for cash flow. Whereas if you're basing the amount to put away on the bottom line, you're just putting away money after all of the commitments of the business have been met.
Yeah, so
how
you
much
base
should
it
you
off your
put
net.
away? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just off net, what we call net, if you're talking bottom
That's
line.
correct,
So
net.
you netted in your pocket $1,000 per month. That's not accounted for anywhere else but profit. You know, that percentage could be, depends on your tolerance, right? I guess, to risk
Yes.
and your greed.
It also depends on your lifestyle. It depends on what your forecast tells you about future cash requirements for the company, because maybe once we hit 150 members, we have to invest another $15,000 in equipment in order to make sure there's adequate equipment for all of the new members that come in. So that depends on a whole bunch of factors, and there is not a simple answer to that question.
Okay. So now what about what's interesting in our business? We have huge upfront capital costs, we have lease costs, but then our operating costs are quite low. Like we don't really have to hold a stock or a warehouse or anything like that, right? What our costs are human resources.
Exactly.
So human resources, I've heard things like human resources in our industry should not account for anything more than 40% of total operational cost. Have you ever used any calculations like that or seen numbers like that floated around?
Yes, in a professional practice, you would use a number of 50%. So if you're using 40% in your business, which is akin to a professional practice, you will put yourself on the side of profitability. But these are real tough times to try and find good people in any profession. And I can tell you that from my experience with manufacturing, construction, professional services. Times are tough out there, and finding good employees is really tough. And one mistake that many people make is if they have a real good employee, they don't pay them enough. And I did have employees when I was still in practice that were well into the sunshine list, okay? And I tried to make sure that they were paid enough, and I really only lost one partner during my tenure as a partner in a public accounting business. So that's from 1975 till 2019. And the reason why that partner retired early was because his dad had a construction company and his dad needed a CFO. So I always made sure that the partners that I had in the business were very, very well treated, because like you pointed out, they are the lifeblood.
Yeah, and if I,
Another mistake though that employers make is that they keep mediocre employees around way too long. Just because they can fog a mirror and they are there when somebody comes into the gym, but you look at the way they interact with the people and you shake your head. You look at the routines that they go through with the people and you say, no, 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 they're not following the handbook that we've told them to follow. They end up being a mediocre employee. And after 3 months, you're married to them, okay? The Employment Standards Act kicks in. Your exposure for wrongful dismissal, which is a higher standard than the Employment Standards Act, it's a standard under common law. If you have a 5-year employee that finally you say, listen, you're out of here, I'm going to terminate you, you'll get sued for wrongful dismissal. And even in this city, I don't know a lawyer who's got the courage to stand up to an employee in a wrongful dismissal suit, because the employees usually win. And usually their wrongful dismissal settlement under common law is 1 month per year of employment to a maximum of, I'm glad you're all sitting down, 24 months. Okay? So unless this guy has stolen money out of the cash register and you've warned him on 2 other occasions not to steal money, unless he's dismissed for cause, you're going to pay through the nose to get rid of that mediocre employee. And because the employment situation is so tough out there right now, they're going to go to a gym down the street and they're going to have your 5 months pay in their pocket, and they're going to get another job in 2 months. So keeping mediocre employees is another mistake that we make when we're staffing.
yeah, and I gotta, like, I've been in this situation, and in the US, I was in this situation a lot. We tried to hang on and train up. We're always about training up. And in our industry, if this person is really bad, just get rid of them. If they're kind of bad, get rid of them. And if they're not that good, get rid of them in the first 3 months, because you can't train up everything in our industry. You just can't. You can train up certain skills, hard skills, sure, but that soft skill. And if you don't have good soft skill people, I've seen in 2 exact mirror environments that I managed in Texas, the person who was there in that building filled the room and the other person kept that room empty, no matter what you did or how you train them. And get rid of them. It's just not worth hanging on. So we have a couple of questions here about cost. So I don't know if you can answer this one, but do you know of an industry standard for membership growth? So I've heard different things like you should expect 10% attrition per month in membership loss. So you should count on at least a 10% membership growth per month to make up for that attrition. Plus whatever difference you need in order to cover cost, I'm assuming. Do you know of any numbers like that in our industry?
No, I don't. But if you were just trying to cover the attrition, you're not going to grow. Mm-hmm. And so maybe if the attrition rate in your industry is 10% per month, you should be targeting a 20. but I do not know
Mhm.
what
Yeah,
level
it's a
of
tricky one.
growth you need in order to realize some true growth, not just hold your own. Sorry.
No, that's good. So now let's see how good you are at math, Dennis. See if you can do math on the fly. So if my overall operational expenses each year are $100,000 and my employee expenses, including maybe myself, are $100,000, so I'm at $200,000. How do I go about calculating how many members I need and at what rate? How do I go about doing that? Other than just put it in a spreadsheet and do some math. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. You already gave me the answer. And the answer is $250,000 you need, because your employment expenses should be 40% of revenues. And if employment expenses are $100,000, $100,000 is 40% of $250,000. Now you have to tell me annual membership costs, because if I stood up, you could see I hardly ever go to a gym. I was at your gym last week or the week before just to have a dog and pony show and look through it. But it's been 50 years since I set foot in any other gym. Okay. I don't know what it costs to go to a gym, but if the annual cost is $1,200, in order to hit that $240,000, you need 2,000 members. Let's try this. That's why I've got this here. You need 200 members.
200 members. Yeah, that sounds about right for that kind of cost, right?
Well, is $100 a month reasonable?
It's kind of average. I would say that's a low average for a small box.
Okay.
Yeah, but so that's about right. So that's kind of where we are in my business. My overall operational costs are about all in 250,000. So we need about 200 to 250 members to kind of make it go. And our average membership is probably about 120 all in.
Okay.
So not far off. So tell me, you said earlier you don't need an accountant, you don't need a lawyer, you don't need a bookkeeper. If we're doing it on our own, can we just do it with some software and a few apps?
Yes, that's how I did my tax return this year. I used TurboTax, and I bought the expensive model just because it had more features for more complicated tax returns, and I think it cost me $120. There are even free tax prep software out there, and you can go onto the Government of Canada website and do your tax return. I would suggest that anybody trying to do their own tax return pay the $120. It's tax deductible legitimately, and use well-recognized commercial software like TurboTax worked for me. Okay.
And how about for a bookkeeper, like even a small business, let's say your gross revenue is under 100,000 a year. Can you do it in QuickBooks or something like that?
Well, you would never, they would probably use their own QuickBooks to do your tax stuff for you. And so what you would do is bring them the proverbial shoebox once a year with that bank statement that I told you to open up in your own name. Pay for all the expenses that you can through that bank statement. There are going to be expenses that you have to pay for in cash. Summarize those for the bookkeeper and let them go to town. And that's why they would get somewhere between $200 and $400 a year.
Yeah. So, and then when you're handling employees, it seems to me that's a good time to have a bookkeeper. Would you agree with that? For all the remittances and the pay periods and tracking all that kind of thing, not a terribly easy thing to do on your own. Would you agree?
Yes. So I'm glad you agreed that we're going to go directly to employees without trying to go through that self-employed subcontractor route. Okay. because you're going to lose that one if you try that self-employed subcontractor.
And speaking of employees, so you've mentioned get rid of the bad ones, use bookkeeping, don't go contractor. Are there other common mistakes people use when it comes to employment?
Hiring relatives is a frequent mistake that they make. Why are you laughing, Sam?
Because it happens all the time. And people make the mistake over and over and over and over again.
Okay, that's exactly right. And they're thinking with their heart, not with their head, when they hire their sister-in-law to do the bookkeeping because she took bookkeeping in high school. Okay. So only hire a relative as a last resort. If you've got a brother that's really interested in the business and getting into business with you, set it up as a partnership. Don't hire him because you'll never be able to fire him. Okay, so another mistake that I see people make is that they hire underqualified relatives and then they can't get rid of them.
And then what about if you're going into partnership? So can it be called a sole proprietorship anymore? What's that
No,
called?
it's called a partnership.
Okay.
And it's treated under exactly the same rules as a sole proprietorship because
Okay.
it's a personal entity.
Mhm.
It's just an extension of the people that are partners in that business.
Brent, did you have a question? See a hand up?
Yeah, I think a lot of us kind of fall into the category of we're technicians. We like working with people, we like doing the programming and all that kind of stuff, but we know nothing about business, which is why we're here. Do you think it's a good idea to learn about the business or just straight up partner with someone who knows about business and then you just take care of the technical stuff and the training and be the face of the business and things like that?
No, you should not partner up with somebody like that. I don't think, because if the business is successful and making money, it's not because of the accountant sitting in the back room with his green eye shades on. It's because your personality, the special and unique skills that you've got. You can go out and hire that accounting advice somewhere. You should not take them on as a partner in the business.
Okay.
But you should get to know the business aspects of that business so that you one day would be able to sit in front of a group of people like this and explain the business aspects to them, because nobody's got a higher interest in taking care of this business properly more than you do, the owner of the business. And even though you're hiring an accountant, he's just going to answer your questions. Most accountants are not proactive and in your face telling you, Trevor, I see the expense you've been putting in for coffee on your way into work every morning. Stop it, because you're going to get yourself into trouble if you continue doing that. They'll just take the information that you feed to them, put it in an orderly manner for the Canada Revenue Agency, and make sure your tax return is filed to the best of their abilities. When you're doing that spreadsheet, no accountant is going to know as much about your particular business in your location, in your town, with your skills and abilities better than you do. And if you guys are already using Microsoft Excel, just get a professional to check over the formula and stuff like that for you to make sure that there isn't an obvious error in them. And you can maintain that spreadsheet month after month after month yourself, because you've got the vested interest in it.
Good advice. Well, folks, this is your last chance to put all
Got
your
one.
business
I
questions
got a
out there.
question.
What do you got?
Dennis, a lot of us are in situations where we are an employee for someone or something, but we also work on the side. and in the same industry. I do have an accountant that has helped me navigate that, but I'm always looking for advice on, how to navigate that most.
You mean like
We're
tax
talking about-
write-off?
Yeah, like
Navigate.
writing off taxes, and because like anything that I buy could be for my work, but it also could be for my business. Do you have any like general comments or tips about that when you've worked around those situations?
Uh,
So
when
I
in
guess
doubt-
I guess actually, like if that's hard to understand, like someone's a construction worker, they're an employee, but they own all their own tools and everything, and they build decks on the weekend.
Right. So as an employee, certain people in employment are allowed to write off things, tools. An auto mechanic, for example, is one that comes right to mind. They're allowed to do that. And I believe somebody in construction probably can too, but I'm going to put that up as a gray area. In a case though where that employee is also working on the side on the weekends as self-employed, there's no question those tools can be written off against that self-employment income, and they're much less subject to be reviewed if you claim them as an expense against self-employment income than you do on that special line on the tax return where you can write it off as an employee. And your accountant should know that. You should not be writing off any of those things as employment expenses. They should all be written off under the self-employment expenses. In a gray area, like I told Brent, probably claim it, but be prepared to defend it and walk away from it. Like I'm willing to walk away from my coffee expense every day if I ever get challenged because I don't have receipts. If it's a significant gray area, email or phone your accountant and get direct professional advice before you get in too deep.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, we better let you get to bed. This is past the witching hour in Guelph, Ontario. Most of the city shuts down at about 8:50 p.m. So it looks like we've gotten through all the questions. I would like to, of course, thank our esteemed colleague, Dennis Weiler, for taking time out. Notice he didn't put a shameless plug in for anything. That's one reason why I want to get it. Usually you get these guys, and well, call me today and I'll give you a 50% off deal. So I'm sure he could refer you to some wonderful individuals, though, if you need help. And I see Jordan's also got someone in their pocket. This is your accountant, Jordan. I've heard about them before. They do a good job for you.
Dennis was retired. That's why I'm like sewering him here and like
Yeah,
putting
no, that's
somebody else
good.
in there.
No, he's got better things to do with his money than take care of your crappy coffee and running shoe deductions.
That was you, man.
All right, man. Anyway, so again, thanks a lot, Dennis. Thanks everybody for being on here. The next shop talk, I think we already got a rough topic, don't we, Sam? Don't you have it roughed out? But I don't know if you'll be around. Do you guys know that Sam's one day past her due date for a baby? Clock is ticking, Sam. One day
You should have had
past.
your 50-50 to see if my water broke during this.
Oh,
talk
that's
or
good.
not.
Yeah, she comes by the gym today. She's going, Drev, I'm going to come by the gym and work out. I said, you're not walking on my turf. Soil my turf. Anyway. So what's the next topic? Are we going to do it or not?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't asked our esteemed guests yet, but looking potentially at firing some questions at some of the newest head S&C coach hires that have occurred across Canada.
Yeah, so basically we have, especially at university settings. So now you've been thrown to the dogs. How's it going? Tell me, what didn't you expect, right? How's it
Yeah,
working
and
out?
we kind of want to do that to give them a little bit of press too. Like you always see it in the US, like articles about hires and what they've done and what they're thinking about and their new philosophies and all this kind of stuff. And we think it's a good opportunity to kind of highlight that. And then also for younger coaches that are aspiring to that, they can get some ideas and also hear about kind of the realities of it. Like this is, Well, one of the guys, we haven't asked him yet, but one of the guys will be Chris Robertson will ask. Hey, Chris, you're leaving Rugby Canada to go to SFU. Like, what do you think you're walking into? How are you going to attack it? Why do you think that they think you're the guy to do it? And cool, we'll check in with you down the road, like, so that we can put that stuff out there in the public to help our field progress instead of us never talking about it.
With
Right
your
on.
permission, Trevor, I'm gonna scoot, okay?
You're gonna scoot. All right, my man. You have my permission. I will see you next week in my gym for the second time. Deal?
Deal, Monday,
All
yeah.
all right, get to bed then. Say hi to the folks. Thanks again, Dennis, for your time.
Good meeting all of you,
You
okay.
did not let
And-
me down a bit. I
Good
knew
luck
you'd be
tomorrow,
great.
Sam.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right, take care, bud. All right, everybody. See you around. I guess we'll shut the recording down so we can talk about Brent behind his back.
Thanks.
Oh, no,
guys.
he's